Good morning, everyone. I want to start off by offering my sincere thanks to Pomerleau for sponsoring this session. Today's session is about challenging our thinking on what's possible, and I'm really honored to have three dynamic and interesting speakers, and will hopefully provoke some deep discussion and some energy in the room, because I know at 10:30 in the morning, you guys are eager for an energy boost in your day. So first, I want to welcome Ian Kerouac, Executive Vice President, Canadian Building Operations and Corporate Transformation from Pomerleau. Ian leads Pomerleau's Canadian building operations while maintaining his responsibilities for strategic initiatives. Prior to that, as Executive VP Strategic Initiatives, he steered Pomerleau's modernization and transformation efforts by focusing on innovation and sustainability, positioning in the market, as well as Pomerleau's Operational Excellence Program. He was responsible for making Pomerleau the leader in the transformation of the Canadian construction industry and oversaw the planning and implementation of strategic initiatives and performance indicators across all business units. Welcome, Ian. I next want to welcome to the stage Ari Bose, Director, U.S. Buildings for IBI Group. He currently leads the design practice in the U.S. He is an award-winning architect and sustainable design specialist, experienced in leading major project teams across both the construction and consultancy environments. His experience encompasses significant concept design with major multi-billion-dollar projects across a variety of sectors, and brings together big picture thinking with broad technical experience in managing an interdisciplinary team. And last but not least, I'd like to welcome Dean Cardell, who is the Vice President overseeing the alternative project delivery sector for buildings at Stantec. He has been a professional electrical engineer for more than 30 years, excelling in communicating design solutions with clients and colleagues. His experience includes public-private partnerships, design builds, and integrated project delivery, and his work includes time on both sides of the process, having worked on proponent teams responsible for project design and delivery, as well as on the owner side, preparing statements of requirements and reviewing compliance. Welcome, gentlemen. So, thank you. Just a reminder before we get started that questions are encouraged and they go on the app. So if you enter them, they will show up here, and we can spend the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session getting to them. But first, we will start our candid conversation. Good morning, gentlemen.
Morning.
Okay, so let's start with the big picture. As leaders in your respective organizations, how do you think about or define innovation as part of your values and hardwire that strategy and action around innovation in your organizations? Ian, why don't you take this one?
Sure. So good morning, everybody. So I would start to say that that people and corporate culture are the most important drivers of innovation. So at Pomerleau, innovation is one of our core values, as such excellence, adaptability, love, and authenticity. And when you have innovation as a value, it comes with creativity, empathy, resilience, and this is more than ever, this is really important. So how we hardwired innovation at Pomerleau. So three things. The first one is the Axe Lab, Fox, and the last one is the digital team. So Axe Lab is where we dream about the future, where we dream about the future of construction. This is our research and development lab. It's actually it's outside Pomerleau's office. It's in the creativity school in Montreal called La Factory. So small group thinking about the future. Then we have Fox. So Fox, it's how we do it. So let's do it, actually. So there's a problem. Let's work together, find a solution, and make sure we can implement the initiative as fast as possible. And then we have our digital team. It's execution support, 3D, 4D, class detection, drones on site to make sure there's a a close connection between the execution. So at the end, you want your team to actually work together. They have to be humble and acknowledge when there's a problem. You want them to be creative and work with the industry to find solution. And then you want to have a system and a process to make sure to implement that initiative as fast as possible.
Okay, Dean, let's talk about innovation, the big picture in your organization.
So it's all about the people. I think Ian said it well from a cultural perspective. I think all organizations are trying to culturally, change and innovate. One of the things we've done is we've created an innovation office about 6 years ago. Each of our market pillars has an innovation leader. Every staff member at Stantec has a little button on their dashboard that if I press it and put an idea in, it goes to the innovation office, where we review them all and we look at them, we incubate them, we fund them, and we try to develop new ways of doing things. Anything from a simple teams approach, where maybe you grab all the projects and be able to work with teams in a better way, all the way up to pavement software management solution, where we can actually look at pavement and find problems, etc. in a major city. So we really try to put it down to the people and have all our staff part of that innovation process. We're finding a lot of great success in that process.
Ari.
Yeah, so I think innovation is probably the most overused word in our industry, right? So, the definition of innovation is, I think, a new process, method, or a product. Simple things like putting operable windows back into our buildings is not innovation. So there's a lot of pedestrian stuff that goes on in our industry that we call innovation. So I think the most important thing about creating culture of innovation that Ian and Dean spoke about is actually creating a process around how innovation is going to take place, because most times innovation is just a result of an accident in most organizations. And if you can't create a repeatable process around how you're going to innovate, those are the kind of systems, some of which Ian and Dean spoke about. We had a tech pivot about 4 years back where we invested heavily in processes, our smart city sandbox, and technology and materials innovation. Those are all different processes and ecosystems that you put in place in organizations to just create a culture of repeatable innovation.
Ari, you brought up an interesting point, the balance between innovation being something that you do deliberately versus something that happens by accident. And so I'm going to have you start with the next question. If you can give us a practical example of an innovative project, and then can you touch on whether or not this was something that you did deliberately from the beginning, or if it was something that happened organically for other reasons? And then I would invite both Dean and Ian to jump in.
Absolutely. I think more than a project, we'll say we have this process. One of the processes that we do is called the hackathon. It's a bi-yearly event where we ask our people to submit their ideas, and no idea is unwelcome. And then we harness the best 50 ideas and team them up with other engineers or professionals so that they can create the result. So about 2 years back, we signed up for the AIA, which is the American Institute of Architects 2030 Challenge. And the outcome of the process was creation of this digital app or platform that we called Green IQ. And what Green IQ has allowed us to do is harness, IBI does about 470 buildings a year, is to actually harness all of the data into this one place and now actually drive actionable insights to our clients, which is much more helpful to our design teams and clients. So I think that's a very, very specific example of how innovation can come out of a process.
Okay.
Hey, I'll give a practical example from a project. It's actually 2 projects. We did a project where we had to basically take all of the staff of a large public sector client and put them into a database. And we waited until the last minute in the project to do it, and obviously we ran into some challenges, and ultimately it did take a little while for us to get that finished. But when we learned from that, and what we did is we did a test bench in the next project, and we took that same client group actually, and we had to do it again because the software was obsolete from the previous project, incredibly. But we took the new software and we were able to put them all in. But we had a test bench that could test it all long before this, and this actually came through the client side, asking for it. It came from the private sector side saying, hey, we need to do something better because we can't be late with this kind of process. So ultimately, we created a test environment, and that test environment proved out, and then we delivered it right on time. So that sort of came from a trial and error from a previous project. So.
I would say that actually we like to try new technologies, and every time there's something new, we like to buy it, try it, and see. Like I always get the new iPhone. I can tell you that it's not because it's a new technology that you're more productive with it, or there's added value on it. But we like to try different technologies and new stuff. And most of the time when you try it, you realize that maybe you can do something else with it. So as an example, a couple of years ago, we did a project on the Jacques Cartier Bridge in Montreal with Moment Factory. It's a lighting project, and we used drones at that time to scan the steel structure. And with the scan 3D, the clash detection, we kind of realized that there was thousands of pieces to redesign. And so we work with the clients and the consultants and find a better way and change kind of the scope and the design to respect the schedule and optimize the cost at the end. So it's a couple of years ago, but today 3D scans and drones, we have I think 15 drones on site on a day like today. So drones, 3D scans, clash detection is kind of normal today.
So maybe let's get into a little bit more of a thought-provoking question. What are clients asking for in terms of innovation? And similarly, I'm wondering if you can comment on, are there actions allowing or hindering the opportunity for innovation? Dean, I'm going to go to you first for this one.
Because what we're seeing more and more often is, I guess two things. We're seeing sort of a resiliency piece. So, we've obviously had a lot of issues around, the weather and disasters, et cetera. So we're seeing the public sector clients saying, hey, we need our facilities to last. A lot of what we're doing is, infrastructure that actually is providing protection for people. And the second thing we're seeing is a lot of First Nation asks as well. So, and again, both of those things need to create some innovation around what we're doing, because both of them can increase some costs, et cetera, and there's certainly a lot of cost pressures. And I think this is where we need to work collaboratively with the teams and with government and the First Nations to really figure out how to deliver these in a meaningful way for all the stakeholders that we're looking at. So that's what we're seeing out there, and it's actually pretty fun starting to work with a different mindset than we have in the past.
It's a two-parter, so I don't remember the second part, but go ahead.
So the first part was, what are clients asking for? And then, do their actions allow or hinder the opportunity for innovation?
Fair enough. I think, if I don't want to repeat what Dean said, but if I rise up beyond that level a little bit, I think ultimately architects and our consultants and contractors, we have an association with our assets that we improve or build only for a very short period of time, while our clients own that asset for 30, 40, 50 years. And I think if you just forget the pure procurement aspect of it as a design build and so on, our clients are looking for us to provide them with strategies and not necessarily a design solution. And I think that's really what our clients are asking for, is what the real estate strategy should be, what the ownership strategy should be, what their overall life cycle ownership of a asset class should be. So I think that's really what our clients are asking, as opposed to just the solution. Of course, the solution is a resultant of what clients are asking for. Do they, what they're doing, hinder or encourage? It completely depends on clients. I think private sector clients are much more open to innovation in an aggressive form than perhaps public sector is. And of course, it's also driven by procurement models and so on. So definitely, procurement models can help in more aggressively pushing innovation throughout the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So I would add to that clients are, construction, it's all about trust. And clients are asking for a different way to build trust now because of the complexity, the uncertainty we're facing. So trust is about, logic, be able to explain how you see the job, how you're going to build it. And then it's about authenticity, so transparency, be open book, find solutions, share ideas, involve all the stakeholders, as the strategic stakeholders, as soon as possible in the process. And then empathy. You need to understand what they are looking for and why, to be able to find solutions with them. So that's kind of the triangle to build the trust. And you can see with the new contractual mode, clients are more open to sit down and look at the risk profile, and they are open to negotiate at the risk and opportunities, and more open to get the supply chain strategic trades around the table, even if we don't have a fixed price yet.
If I may add to that just a second, sir, is I really like the point Ian you made about empathy, because I think once you sit side by side, as general, when you're looking at an architect or a contractor, our end game generally is about, hey, I want to get a building out of it or whatever out of it. But if you really truly sit side by side with them, you may find out that the best solution for that client may just be a digital solution and not an asset. And I think our clients are looking for that more and more, to really provide them with the advice of the best thing they could do, and not necessarily, they may have come to the table thinking of a certain solution, but the end solution may not look like that. And I think that's where we can all add value, because perhaps they are not exposed to the entire gamut of solutions that's actually available to us as industry.
So talking about projects and procurement, we were chatting a little bit in the green room prior to this session about different P3 models and which ones might allow more space for innovations and which ones might not. Let's elaborate what we chatted about for the audience. Ian, do you want to go first?
I can go first. It's just different. So if you look at the design build, and so it's construction cost and design cost driven. And if you look at the DBFM, it's more about the project. So both will allow kind of innovation, but it will be kind of different. So in my mind, P3s is a good way to make sure there's an alignment between the stakeholders. They all want the best projects. There's some requirements. So in my mind, it's just a matter of, if it's too prescriptive, then it's hard to innovate, and you have to try to follow exactly what's required. But in my mind, the client should focus on what they need and not necessarily on how to build it and how to do it. Yeah.
Yep.
So when you look at the financing and I guess the operational models, because there's been a lot more design builds lately, I think, than those models, you do lose a little bit of that longer term piece that you're talking about. And I think even on the financing side, as we look at maybe sustainable financing, we look at different models where maybe there is additional money available if you take it to the next level. I mean, we got to look at innovative ideas in order to build infrastructure that's going to be more resilient and more sustainable. And I think the financing piece and the operating piece are a big part of that. And maybe we've lost a little bit of it in the standard design build model. So it's something to, I think it's something to look at, and it doesn't apply everywhere, but it certainly can apply to some of the projects that are out there today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I definitely have opinions about which model is better or not, but
Share them.
I mean, design bid build or design build, if you look at it and if you just add the financing piece to it, I think that's really just alternative procurement to me. I mean, if you really have to harness the true power of innovation and P3s, then probably DBFM is the model. However, we don't incentivize the ownership model of that asset. And, that has to make DBFM models attractive, you have to move the risk around, you have to really allow for, and there's lots of real technologies available right now that the design and construction industry can bring in terms of the asset life cycle. Digital twinning, for instance, can really drive data-driven insights into the practice. And as you own that asset for the next 20 years, 15 years, that can really help our clients optimize. And I think COVID's taught us a lot. I think COVID's taught us a lot about really the kind of overnight how building uses can change. And having a model like that actually gives our client more resilience in terms of how they can pivot, how they can change the use of the product type over the ownership of the entire asset. It also allows the private industry, designers, developers, contractors, a much longer span of and capital and outlay to actually bring innovation and possibilities that the owner can. So in that sense, I really consider DBFM or DBFOM, whichever versions, as true P3s. And I certainly, in terms of maintaining relationship with the asset cycle, would prefer that over just, having a 3-year association with a product.
So let's touch a little bit on the sustainability piece. So obviously I work in materials, but I also work in the sustainability space. So this is a little bit of a vested interest question, if you may. So let's talk about sustainability and how innovation can support carbon reduction in projects. In the infrastructure space, right, it's not only about reducing embodied carbon, but it's about building resiliency in infrastructure to deal with climate change. So how does innovation work within the sustainability space, in your opinion? Dean, I haven't picked on you first in a while, so why don't you go first?
I think from what we're seeing again is an ask, to meet maybe the 2050 or 2080 challenges, to make the buildings resilient so that they can actually last that long, or the linear infrastructure for that matter. And at the same time, of course, sustainability tells us to use less energy, use less material, and I think there is a bit of a thing that we have to look at with respect to how do you balance something that you want to last, to your point, 50 to 100 years, because you want to reuse that asset. You want to adaptive reuse it later on, and you want to keep that asset for as long as possible. So, I would look to the community here. I mean, you got a bunch of really smart consultants and builders and government people out in the crowd today, and I would say that that's something that we've got to challenge ourselves. I think you talked about sort of that compassion, that feel for that alliance that you're trying to create. That model where you're working with the teams and exploring different things, because there's a lot of new technology coming out, and it's something that where you have a prescriptive specification, it's difficult to innovate. But if you give the opportunity to the team, you build that trust that you talked about. I think you can really create, some elements, collaborative elements, where you're going to get the best building, and you're going to test things, or the best infrastructure, and let it be tested. Let it see how long it lasts, because we all are trying to create something that's going to stand the test of time, and yet, have the least impact on the environment.
You look like you're on the edge of your seat.
I think I have, architects, we have a real kind of excitement when it comes to, you throw a new building at us, and it's this shiny little thing that's coming towards us, and we're all excited. But I think the real opportunity that sits right with us right now is the existing building stock and adaptive reuse. And if you look at downtown Toronto today, Class B, I think the vacancy rate is well above 20%. If you forget ownership, if you look at real occupancy rates within the city of Toronto, it's probably for Class B buildings is 40%. So, 2 out of 5 buildings are actually lying vacant. And if we really look at how we could for example, right now we're doing a 37-story office tower, we're converting into, life sciences with a very, shallow height, but that's a true challenge, and you're trying to have to bring in real innovation into that to create something. But there's a new building you're not creating, there's an existing building that you're using. So that's a huge opportunity that exists within the industry for carbon reduction just by existing building stock. And that has to be one of the fundamental ways we have to approach. The second thing is around material innovation. We have to start looking at, well, mass timber is one example, but how can we bring in more bio-based building products, plant-based insulation? There's a lot of work being done in the supply chain around that. And the more effort as designers and contractors and consultants we can put into, even concrete. Sarah, you and I were chatting around supplemental products. Are there bio-based supplemental products that we can bring in? Those are ways we can really bring actionable carbon reduction into the buildings sector, infrastructure sector.
I would add that actually we launched our first ESG report last June, and so we made also commitments in the future and long-term commitments, and like for emission for scope 1 and 2 reduction by 40% for 2030. But at the same time, scope 3 is everything we're using on site. It's very hard for us to kind of commit on it. It's an industry kind of challenge. So I look forward. I'm sure in the coming months and years we'll see new technologies, new material, and I would love to use green concrete and carbon capture. So I'm sure in the coming. Yeah. So I'm pretty confident that we'll see new material coming up in the future.
So, headlines today in the newspaper all about inflation. So let's talk about how innovation can be part of the solution to the inflation pressures we're seeing on projects. Ian, why don't you take this one to start?
Because I'm a general contractor.
Yes.
I promised a thought-provoking panel.
Doesn't affect us at all. Dean and I are just watching you.
So I'll go first. So 3 things. I took notes because I knew that you would ask that. Contractual mode, design and off-site construction, and try new technology. So we kind of mentioned the contractual mode, and this morning I think infrastructure in Ontario nailed it on the kind of progressive design build, maybe to be able after that to sign a P3 or something. But the progressive design build, be work together during the design and be open book in terms of innovation, but also problem of the supply chain delays and costs is the right way to do it. So we need to be able to have an open discussion about risk and opportunities. We're still open to take risk as a design builder, but we need to be able to kind of calculate it and know exactly how much it is. Then foster collaboration. We need contractual mode who can align the stakeholders together. So we see more and more of those. So this is the right way to do it. And early involvement. We want to be at the table as soon as possible to be able to understand the project and influence the design and make sure that there's an alignment between the scope, the design, and then how we're going to build it. So this is the part of the contract, contractual mode. Design and offsite. I think we have everything in our hands right now. We have all the tools, the experience, the expertise to build faster, greener, better, and even reduce costs. We have really good virtual model with the BIM and 3D now, and but we don't use it enough. I think the modular prefab, offsite, even robots are coming. So we just need a perfect storm. And I think, with hyperinflation, high interest rates, housing crisis, labor crisis, we kind of have that kind of perfect storm to say, hey, we should sit down together and we have to find a new way to build.
Yeah, for sure.
From a risk perspective, I mean, I think your point on inflation is an interesting one, in that do the government own that risk, or should the team own that risk? And you can look and say that things that are out of your control, perhaps the government should own that risk, because you're going to build dollars into that risk that might be either too low or too high. So you don't want it to be either. You want to provide value for money on these kind of projects. I mean, I think the other thing, and from the design side, is when we look at the standards that we've created, should we be looking at these standards to either find ways to modify them a little bit so that we can actually, again, get more innovative in design, wear a sweater, these kind of things, if they're creating challenges on cost, right? And on the supply chain side, again, can we find material ourselves and build material ourselves within Canada that we can actually use? So all of those things, I think we have to do a better job in the design community of really understanding what's what and how quickly you can get it, so that we can actually make sure that some of those risks get managed.
Yeah, I mean, Ian and Dean already spoke to some of these things. I think, if you find the answer to inflation, I think Bank of Canada is looking for that answer too. So not sure we have the right answers, but I think there are certain issues that both the design and the construction industry are faced with. One is, of course, inflation, but I think there's a much more serious issue, and that is around the idea of availability of skilled labor. And I don't think that we have enough pipeline in terms of talent coming through our various industries to even be able to deliver the kind of ambitions that we have seen today. Even the minister and Michael spoke about this morning about the pipeline. So I think we need to invest and pivot heavily into digital transformation of our organizations and looking at best ways to use human skills. And things like timesheets and all that, a robot should be doing it. We should really start to look at how we can bring process automation into our industries and really use human skills for smart, intelligent ways of handling business and human interaction and so on.
Let's talk about failure, the thing that nobody ever wants to talk about. Let's talk about an example of when you might have failed at innovation and what you learned from it and how that may have changed your approaches in the future. Ari, I'm going to start with you.
I've never failed, so I don't. I think the thing to think about always is failures. Obviously, it's just one of the most often sayings or common sayings is that failure is the stepping stone to success. But I think the most important thing is to understand what you learned from the failure. And, for us as an organization, when we went on the tech pivot 4 years back, we didn't know where we were going, and we had a lot of missteps. But the overall ambition of the organization remained that this is the way we are going to go. And so what we really learned was perseverance. And I think that's one of the number one things we have to learn, because in a business, we are so much driven by the value of our stock somewhere and just, running our businesses with balance sheets that sometimes it's hard to look at the longer term picture and really invest and believe that we are headed somewhere. And that might take some upfront investment, which might take a little bit of time to realize itself. But once the organization and people as a whole believe that the end goal is something that we are all working towards, that perseverance is what you learn from. And that's kind of what we learned. And so, the first 18 months were tough, but the next 3 years, they just put us on a very different trajectory of growth.
When you look at a project, you're gonna succeed hopefully on most elements, which Ari's obviously has. And as we look at them and we finish the projects, what we like to do is do a lessons learned with the client. If it's design build or a P3, do a lessons learned with the broader team. I think these kind of things, again, to trying to lead to growth. And you're gonna make mistakes. Things are gonna happen, but what do you learn from those mistakes? And try never to make those mistakes again. And when you look at some of the things that have happened in this industry, there's been a tremendous amount of improvement on sustainability, on driving for that sustainability. Things the set points we're making are far greater than they've ever been before, and we're still achieving them. And I think that's the importance, that you continue to make progress. As you said, it leads to more success, and that's what we see, and we try to work collaboratively with all the teams to learn from our failures and get better from them.
We have a structured approach for innovation, and we want to fail fast. So the way we see innovation, actually, or the way we manage innovation, there's a governance, or a go no go. You have operation who are involved in that go no go process to make sure that is it really something they need? Do we have a problem, an issue to fix? And then transparency. You want to make sure that if you don't fall in love with the idea and realize at the end that there's no added value with it. So transparency with the partners, with the team, and make sure that it works. And maybe an example of failure, at the beginning of COVID, we tried on one side to use RFID and IoT for contact tracing and distance and everything, and it was a total failure. But but we learned to use RFID and IoT at that time, and today we're trying to work to get our schedule update in real time with the same kind of technology. So we learned a lot about it, and so it was a bad idea to use it for that purpose. And today it might become something very efficient for us.
So I just want to remind our audience members that we have 3 very knowledgeable speakers in the hot seat. They have no place to go for the next 10 or 12 minutes, and so I would encourage you to place your questions in the app. I know we're eager to take them. But maybe let's ask another question about barriers to innovation. So if you could name the single greatest barrier to innovation, what would it be? And if this was a perfect world, what would you do about it to change it? You look like you want this one first, Dean. You smiled, so you get it.
So actually, there's a lot. Like, we don't change because we're scared, risk adverse, and everything. But I would say to totally change the construction, it would be predictability. Most of the construction trades or general contractor have less than 6 months to a year of pipeline. The tier 1 contractor, we're lucky, we're probably between 1 to 3 years, 1 to 2 years in average. But when we have 6 months or a year of pipeline in construction, it's really hard to say I'm going to invest in maybe a new facility for prefabrication or training or hire. You don't even know if you're going to survive to next year. So I think, and you can imagine, if you give me 5 buildings to build in the next year, or you give me the same 5 buildings and to build in 2 years, the way I'm going to buy, the procurement, the material I'm going to use, the design, it will be completely different. So in my mind, predictability is one. I don't know how to do it, but I can tell you that it would change. If I get the same project but 30 times, for sure I have enough, and I have enough in hands to work differently and invest and make sure I'm going to build faster, at a better price, greener, and with better quality.
It's when you look at the construction industry, it's often said that we had the least improvement in efficiencies in in any industry. And I find that really odd because there's been all kinds of innovation and all kinds of things, and yet it still seems to take the same amount of time to do things. So you're starting to see a lot of, I guess, direction around speed and improvement. And I think to your point, where does this industry go? And if things can be done in a more automated way, I think we're going to see a lot more elements there. So I think it comes down to people. I think our biggest thing is lack of skilled labor. I think to your point, and we need to drive more skilled labor, more training, more resources into the system. Huge amounts of infrastructure dollars going to be spent. And very young people starting to execute some of them, not necessarily a bad thing, but have they been trained well enough to really drive that forward?
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a lot of factors which are barriers to innovation, but a slightly different take on Ian's point, but I think they all add up to the same thing is one is resistance to change, and the second is the appetite for risk. And these two go hand in hand. And the resistance to change is nothing, I think beep me off more than somebody saying this is how we have already always done it and this is how we should do it. But both of these things come down to leadership. And I think as leaders in our organization, we have to take the responsibility to really allow our people to fail. And once you take that fear of failure out of, and I'm talking just internally in terms of innovation here, I think the results can be pretty drastic in most organizations, and allow everyone a voice at the table. Sometimes, not the most senior most person is going to have the best idea. So if you create that culture of transparency and just giving everyone a voice at the table, great things can happen, I think.
Okay, so we do have an audience question, and I quite like it. So the question is, I led a project studying innovation in P3s and found that although P3s do indeed promote innovation, they only incentivize small incremental innovations. The industry generally views innovation as a risk that they shy away from. So how do we use P3s to achieve more radical innovations in our projects? Dean, I haven't picked on you in a while, and I noticed you're maybe averting my gaze, so I'm gonna ask you to start.
Yes, it's a great question, and one of the things we see is that the specificity that comes from the output specifications often leads us to shy away from being more innovative, because when we try to get more innovative, we often get into challenges at the project, whether or not we met the requirements as they call for. I did a project where we submitted 31 innovative elements during the bid process to change the output specification to look at it. One of them was a district energy solution. All 31 were rejected. Those 31 elements probably cost us $600,000-$700,000 time to put those elements in. Everyone rejected. You don't feel like then being innovative if the other side is not going to look at any of those challenges. Often it's looked at too when we're doing innovation on the proponent side. It's looked at, we're just trying to get cheaper, and that's not always the case, right? So that's an interesting, although sometimes less expensive isn't necessarily a bad thing. So you got to wonder sometimes what's happening. So I think again, when I look at it, we need both parties to sort of want to collaborate more, and maybe some of the more collaborative, newer. I mean, they're older, but also newer procurement models, whether it be alliance or APD or IPD models, et cetera, even progressive design build, may lead to, again, promoting more innovation than the more adversarial model.
All right.
I don't have anything.
I can go. I totally agree first with the question, because as a design builder, when we close, let's say, a bid, a proposal for a P3, normally the list of risk is like 3-4 pages, and opportunities is only on one pager. So there's a lot of risk as a design builder. So you don't have the reflex to try new things. So you want to make sure that you'll control the execution. You want to make sure that you'll respect the schedule and the milestones. I would say though that if you want to push innovation in P3s, it's on clients can set some goals in terms of sustainability, in terms of technology, like the way they want to communicate, in terms of D&I, and in terms of, so I would say for P3, if we want to push in the market, especially through a bid process, you want to make sure that all the bidders, you get competitive offers from them. So I would say that during the process is to set the bar at a level that the bidders can reach, but at the same time, every time you can raise the bar a little bit more.
So we have time for one last question. And it's, how do you help promote innovation, knowledge, and process sharing across teams and countries?
So for us, we do that by what we call our digital sandbox. And so we've created this ecosystem of a virtual environment where we not only host events, but the best learning lessons from all our projects are kept in an immersive environment where people can actually learn and access in what I call a synchronous manner, which is at their own time, and it's available to them all the time. And then secondly, just to socialize that by hosting our own events in this digital and virtual, and we also have a physical space. But making that as a process, as a standardized process, and making that a part of your culture takes effort and time and commitment at a higher level in the organization. And I think that's the best way to do it, is to make that a part of the ecosystem of the organization culture.
Any last thoughts?
One of the things we try to do as well is partner with organizations, right? So try to become a true partner, not try to hold anything back, share our digital practices. We do have a big digital practice team, and no matter who you're partnering with, we think we can learn things from them, right? So we're seeing the industry change. We're seeing trade partners doing a lot of the work. So again, we're going to have to adapt and find ways to work with everybody to understand the better way of delivering it and become more efficient ourselves.
Ian, very briefly, you get the last word.
So I would say that I would add on that the challenge right now is communication with some people working at the office, on site, at home. Even if it's clear that AxLab is R&D, Fox it's a continuous improvement, and then you have the team. People are mixing together the R&D with operation, and they think they are totally disconnected with the operation. They don't know what they're doing. So you want we need to find a better way to communicate. For us, it's make sure that everybody's involved. So all the regional office are involved, and the operations and the innovation team together. When there's a problem, they look at it. Even if they find a solution, maybe it's good for Ottawa, but it's not good for Vancouver, or not yet. So you want to make sure that if you're using a robot in Ottawa, but you're trying to learn to use the BIM and models in Vancouver, you have to wait a couple of years when they're ready. So you want to make sure that your people are involved and they're listening.
I want to sincerely thank you, gentlemen, Ari, Dean, and Ian, for sharing your insights with us today on a topic that is only growing in importance. And I want to sincerely thank Pomerleau for sponsoring this session. Please, everyone, give them a round of applause.
Thank you.
Before we head into our first breakout sessions, the organizers of P3 2022 have asked me to thank the sponsors of those 3 upcoming sessions: Fengate Asset Management, Canada Infrastructure Bank, and the Trade Commissioner Service of the Government of Canada. We will return to this room at 12:45 for our luncheon and a keynote speech by Laith Kamia, Managing Director, BMO Capital Markets, sponsored by Colas Canada. We'll also present the 2022 Champion Award to Aecon Steve Nacken. Please enjoy the panels, and we'll see you soon.